Snow stung like thrown sand. Across the flats outside Last Chance, Montana, it came sideways, a bitter, blinding white. Lark Donovan kept her mare pointed straight into it. She'd crossed worse. Behind her, a boy named Billy Pike was freezing on a sled. He was 14, trying his best to look like a man, but the cold was winning. Tied down next to him, a butter churn rattled like old bones. And behind the sled, 3 milk cows huddled, tails to the wind, miserable. Lark muttered the words to herself, practicing. I require daily milking. Her cheeks burned, and it wasn't from the cold. It was the thought of saying it out loud to a stranger, a demand, not a request. The spring thaw was late that year. It teased you with a little sun at noon, then tried to kill you after sundown. Lark's coat smelled of wood smoke and hard soap. Her hands were chapped raw, but they held the reins with a quiet confidence. She was a woman who'd been alone too long to bother with bragging. She wasn't tall, but on a horse, she looked like she belonged there, like a crow on a high branch, light, still, and seeing everything. Billy sucked his teeth. The sled skittered over a hidden drift. You're sure he'll pay cash? He called out, his voice thin in the wind. Cash or calves, Lark said, not turning back. Either way, we'll go home with something warmer than this. Her little dairy shack was 3 miles out of the mining town. It had survived a winter that broke bigger, better outfits. She'd made it selling cream to saloons and milk to mothers whose husbands came back from the mines with empty pockets and mean tempers. But that wasn't enough. Not for the long run. She needed a contract, a real one, with the big ranch by the river, the Double 5. It was owned by a widower named August Hale. People didn't go see August Hale unless they had to. He'd lost his wife 2 winters back. They called it winter fever. Folks said he'd built his ranch on pure grit and good math. They also said he never smiled, and that he had a 10-year-old daughter with eyes like a storm about to break. Lark had seen them once from a distance. The man was a tall, straight shadow on a horse. The girl rode right beside him, sitting stiff as a board, trying to prove she was tough enough. Lark wasn't looking for a friend. She was looking for a patron. She had milk, cream, and butter to sell. He had a payroll and a ledger. That was the whole equation. What she could not afford, what she did not need, was to feel a single thing for the man. The river appeared first, a gray smudge of willows and mist. Then the ranch spread out behind it. A bunkhouse, a blacksmith shop, a big house with a wide porch. A bell clanged, and men spilled out of the buildings. But one person ran out ahead of them, a small girl in a bright red scarf. She stopped dead when she saw Lark's little parade. 1 woman, 1 boy, 3 cows. Pa! The girl yelled, her voice sharp as a shard of ice. Pa! A door opened. August Hale stepped out onto the porch. No hat, no gloves. He squinted into the wind. He was maybe 35, worn down like old leather, but strong. Grief had carved him lean and left him standing. His hair was cut short, like he'd done it himself with a dull knife, and no patience for vanity. Miss, he said. His voice was calm, steady, like a good rope. You brought your own herd. I brought proof, Lark said, swinging down from her mare. Her boots hit the packed snow with a hard crunch. Name's Lark Donovan. This here is June. That's Dolly. The stubborn one is Wit. She looked him square in the eye. If you want milk on your table by sunrise, I require daily milking, and shelter out of this wind. You got either to spare? A few of the men standing behind him let out a quick, mean little laugh. The girl's eyes narrowed, staring them down. August Hale didn't smile, but something at the corner of his mouth twitched, like it was thinking about it. Pa, the girl said, tugging his sleeve. We could put him in the old training stall. It's dry. Then she whispered, Please. Cook says we're down to beans and coffee water. August's gaze moved from the cows, to Lark, to the boy on the sled. He didn't look at her face for long. Men like him never did, not at first. They measured the practical things. The neat mend on her saddle skirt. The way her rope was coiled for use, not for show. The simple fact that she'd brought her proof with her, right through a storm. "You require daily milking," he said again, tasting the words. "I do," she said. The heat in her cheeks was gone now, frozen right out of her. "Cows don't understand Sundays or storms." "Men neither," he said, so softly she almost didn't hear it. Then, louder, "Cal! Clear the training stall. Tommy, fetch water." He looked down at his daughter. "May." "I'm here," the girl said, her voice bright. "You'll help the lady," he said. Lark looked at the girl, then at August Hale, and she told herself she felt nothing, not a thing. "Good," she said, and she meant it to sound like business. They didn't shake hands. The wind did it for them, pushing them together for a second by the barn door. As the men started moving, Lark took June's halter herself. "June doesn't listen," May announced, trailing right at Lark's heels. The girl was desperate to be useful. "Not to me, anyway. Pa says animals listen to people who listen first." Lark ran a hand over the stall. The planks were solid. The dirt floor was dry. "June listens just fine," she said. "She's just stubborn when she's scared. Like a person." May's chin shot up. "I ain't scared." "No," Lark said, her voice gentle for the first time. "You ain't." She took the girl's hand and placed it on the cow's neck. "Here, close to the ear. Stroke down. Say, 'Hush now, girl.' Go on, try it." May did, and the wildness in the cow's eyes softened, just a little. "See?" Lark said. "You're good at this." The girl lit up so bright Lark had to look away. A compliment could stick to a child for years, and you could never take it back. August Hale was watching from the side of the stall, his arms crossed. He looked like a man who only slept 5 hours a night because 6 felt like a luxury. "You planning to sell milk by the gallon or by the habit?" he finally asked. "Habit," Lark said, setting her milking stool. She braced a pail with her boot and started to work. A thin blue steam rose from the fresh milk. "You pay for steady, not for splash. 3 cows, milked twice a day. You provide shelter, feed, and grain. I'll give you 6 gallons a day for your cookhouse, cream for your coffee, and butter twice a week. I keep the calves." One of the hands, a big man named Cal, whistled low. "Listen to her, boss. Running her own figures." August ignored him. "That'll cover 15 men on milk, 20 on luck." "Plus your girl," Lark added, and then straightened up. She shouldn't have said it. You don't put your hand on a widower's wound. But May grabbed onto the words like a lifeline. "Pa, could we have milk cake again? The one Mrs. Clean used to make?" "May," August said, his voice dropping low. The girl's mouth snapped shut. Tears welled in her eyes. She marched past Lark and slammed the tack room door. The barn went silent. Lark's hands stilled. She hadn't come here to get involved, but she couldn't leave a hurt child alone in a barn full of men who didn't know what to do. "I'll want a warm corner," she said, not looking at August. "A stove. Billy and I can sleep in the loft." "The loft?" Cal asked, looking amused. "You sleeping in my place?" Lark's voice was flat. Milk doesn't keep bankers' hours. August was turning the numbers over in his head. She could see him doing it. Man-hours saved. The cost of a woman who could keep her own counsel. "Stove we can do," he said finally. "A tin one for now. Bunkhouse is men only. The loft will suit you if you don't mind owls. You feed your cows my hay. In return, I want your word my table gets the first pour." "That's my price, too," Lark nodded. "Fair," he said. "Write it down," she shot back. "I won't be paid in promises." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a second, it felt like something was breaking and something was being built, all at the same time. His gaze didn't measure her. It asked a question. Not can you, but will you? "I have a ledger thicker than a Bible," he said. "You'll sign." I'll sign. Cal will witness. Billy, too, Lark said. He's steadier than he looks. May! August called towards the tack room door. Fetch the ledger and stop cussing under your breath. A moment later, the girl came out, hugging a big black book to her chest like a shield. She shoved it toward Lark. Sorry, she mumbled. You're fine, Lark said. You'll help me churn butter on Friday, if your pa says so. May's head snapped up, hope chasing away the shame. We'll see, August said, which was Montana for yes. They signed the contract right there on a dusty workbench. Lark wrote her name, straight and plain, Lark Donovan. She did not write the name she'd left behind in Missouri. Some things you carry in your bones, not on a piece of paper. Miss Donovan, August said, reading her signature. How long you been in these parts? Long enough to stop expecting the train to run on schedule, she said. A shadow crossed his face. Understanding. I'm sorry you had to travel through last winter. We lost 3 horses and a man on the South Trail. I came before that, she said, tapping the ink pen against the table. On a stage with a driver who complained the whole way. He didn't like that I rode with a pistol under my coat. Do you still? Cal asked, only half joking. Lark's eyes flicked to the doorway, to the way the men were standing. It wasn't quite a circle, but it could be. I do, she said, her voice even, and I know when not to point it. August's mouth did that almost smile again. Practical, he said. That'll do. By dusk, the barn smelled like a promise. Warm cows, hot iron, clean hay. The cook sent over bowls of stew. May sat beside Lark, telling her the names of every horse, every creek, and every grumpy man on the ranch. Pa doesn't sleep when the river's high, she said in a small voice. He walks. I hear him stop at my door. I pretend to be asleep. Why? Lark asked. If I open my eyes, he goes away, May whispered. If I sleep, he stays a little longer. Lark put her spoon down. Across the yard, August was staring up at the clouds, trying to read the weather. He looked like a man reading a letter he couldn't bear to burn. You miss your ma, Lark said to May. It wasn't a question. The girl's throat tightened. I don't remember her smell anymore, just her hands, and her voice when she sang the low parts in church. Lark listened to the wind. My mother sang off key, she said. My father said it kept the coyotes away. May let out a short, honest giggle. Did it work? Coyotes still came, Lark said, but they never came up on the porch. Just then, August walked across the yard. He stopped at the barn door, just out of the light. River's rising, he said. Ice broke up at Jackson's Bend. We'll hear it by midnight. I won't be sleeping anyway, Lark said, and regretted the truth of it. He nodded at the cows, the neatness of her corner. You keep a tight corner. It keeps me, she replied. Miss Donovan, he started, then hesitated, like he almost used her first name. Anything else you require, besides the daily milking? Behind him, Cal snorted. Lark felt a foolish heat climb her throat. A length of clean rope, she said, her voice sharp, and a good hook on the stall door. Men knock before they come in when I'm working. That's not negotiable. August went completely still. She thought she'd pushed too far. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but hard as iron. Done, and no one forgets it. No one would. Not with that tone. It was the sound of a line being drawn. May leaned against Lark's hip, a small, warm weight, a decision made. Tomorrow, she said, bright again. Can we make butter, Miss Donovan? I can churn. Lark should have said, we'll see. But she said, yes, and felt a hook set deep in her own mouth. The river woke them at midnight. A boom like a cannon shot as a sheet of ice broke free, followed by a low, grinding moan that you could feel in your teeth. Lark lay awake in the loft, listening. When the sky began to pale, She slid down the ladder. May was already there, wrapped in her red scarf, a little soldier waiting for orders. "I can help," she whispered. They worked in the quiet hush of dawn. By the time the first ranch hands came to the door, yawning, there were fresh pails of milk cooling. May stood guard. "Knock," she hissed, fierce as a mama bear. They knocked. Within a week, the whole ranch knew. Lark Donovan could bring order to chaos. She had Billy splice new ropes. She hammered hooks into the stalls. She kept a chalk tally of the milk on the barn door, and her numbers were never wrong. August watched it all. He kept his distance, but he'd appear with practical questions. "How long do you scald your pails? How do you salt your butter?" He never smiled, but sometimes his eyes would lighten for a moment. One evening, he stopped at the foot of her loft ladder. "You need more blankets." "I've got enough," she lied. He nodded, like he knew she was lying. The next morning, a thick wool blanket was folded neatly on the bottom rung. She left it there for a full day before taking it. Pride keeps you warm for a night, but it'll leave you cold for a winter. The thaw came in fits and starts, turning the road to town into a mess of mud. At the general store, Mrs. Hobbs served up gossip with the salt and lamp wicks. "You'll watch yourself," she told Lark, her voice low. "There's a man in town. Name's Ezra Talbot. Paper out of Helena says he's got a claim on the river water. Says ranching is a waste of good flow. He's got enough money to make ink run uphill." "Paper don't change a river," Lark said, but her stomach went cold. On the boardwalk, a man in a fancy derby hat stepped in front of them. He was too clean for Montana. His eyes were like polished glass. You could see right through them, and there wasn't much there. "Miss," he said, tipping his hat to Lark, but his eyes lingered on May in a way that made Lark's skin crawl. "Ezra Talbot. You work for the 55 now, I hear. Please extend my compliments to Mr. Hale, and tell him that when the territorial court is finished, his days of wasting river water on cattle will be over. Water with purpose belongs to men with plans." "Water belongs to God," Lark said, her voice flat. "And the land he laid it on." Talbot smiled, a patient, predatory smile. "The law, madam, belongs to the men who write it. Give Mr. Hale my card." Lark didn't take it. May, small and furious, snatched the card from his hand. She tore it neatly in two. Talbot's smile faltered for a second. "Careful, child," he said softly. "Pretty things break." Lark put a firm hand on May's shoulder and steered her away before the girl could throw a punch. Back at the ranch, August and his men were already at the riverbank, measuring the current with their eyes. "Talbot was in town," Lark said. "He carries himself like a court paper that ain't been signed yet." "We know," August said, his jaw tight. "He sent a survey crew down this morning. Took bearings like we were already a ditch." "What will you do?" May asked, her voice trembling with anger. "What we always do," August said. "We'll work. We'll tie what's loose and stake what's ours." Lark studied the bend in the river. "You'll need cribbing," she said, thinking aloud. "Woven brush, sunk and weighted. I read about it. It'll buy you time if the water rises high." Cal stared at her. "You read about cribbing?" "I read about whatever keeps me alive," Lark said. "You've got willow. Cut it now before the sap runs." August just nodded, as if he expected nothing less. "Show me," he said. They worked until their hands were raw, cutting willow, weaving it into thick bundles, anchoring them with heavy rocks. Lark's palms blistered and bled. She wrapped them in rags and kept going. That night, the sky turned a bruised, ugly purple. The cook counted the flour sacks and said the word blizzard like it was a man who'd beaten him in a fight once. August found Lark in the barn. She was straining the evening's milk, her forearms strong and damp in the lantern light. May sat nearby, shelling beans with a grave seriousness. The sight of them, so calm and orderly, seemed to hit him hard. "You'll want to bring that heater closer to the stalls," he said after a moment. This blow will find every crack. I'll need canvas too, she replied, to rig a windbreak. He nodded. We'll cut another load of willow before it hits. He paused. Lark. It was the first time he'd said her name. She looked up, and something passed between them. It wasn't heat. It wasn't comfort. It was recognition. He was seeing the woman who had survived her own winters. What was she like? Lark asked, her voice quiet. Your wife. May's head shot up. August's hand closed into a fist, then opened again. She sang low, he said, his voice rough. Said it was ungodly to squeak at the Lord. She once shot a coyote from the porch with my second-best rifle. Then she scolded me for leaving it where she could reach it. He swallowed hard. She could be cruel when she was tired. So can I, Lark said. That just makes you human. It's what you do after that counts. May got up and laid a small hand on her father's sleeve. August didn't pull away. He just stood there, caught between the past and the present. Outside, the wind began to howl. The storm hit at dusk. It came down like a wall, a blinding fury of snow and ice. The world shrank to the yellow glow of the lanterns in the yard. Lark had just finished nailing a canvas sheet over the barn door when a horse shrieked in the darkness. It was a high, terrified sound, and it didn't belong to any of their animals. "Rider!" Tommy roared from the yard. August was already moving, pulling on his coat. Lark grabbed hers and ran right behind him. A figure stumbled out of the white chaos. A man, half frozen, leading a lathered horse. Behind it, he was dragging a travois, a makeshift sled. There was a person bundled on it, still as death. A dark stain was spreading across the blankets at his side, a stain the color of black cherry. "Avalanche!" the rider stammered, his teeth chattering. "On the Flume Road. Talbot's crew. Rock came down. Crushed him. Sent me for help." But as they hauled the injured man inside, laying him on the big kitchen table, Cal muttered, "That ain't from no rock." August put a hand on the man's wrist. He swore under his breath. "He's breathing. Just barely. Donovan, get my kit." He didn't need to explain. Lark was already cutting the lashings with her pocket knife. The injured man was young, no more than 20. "Name?" she asked him gently. "Will," he whispered, his eyes fluttering. "Will Rakes." "Stay with us, Will," she said, her voice an order and a prayer. The wind hammered the walls of the house. August's hands moved with a terrible, practiced speed. Knife in boiling water, needle and thread, whiskey poured over torn flesh. Lark worked beside him, anticipating every move. She saw a different man now, not just a grieving rancher. This was a man who had stood at a deathbed before and lost, a man who had sworn it would never happen again. "Hold him steady," August grunted, probing the wound. Lark leaned closer, wiping the blood away with a clean cloth. The wound was deep, mangled. It looked like a nasty gash from a sharp piece of rock, just like the rider said. But underneath the torn flesh, something else was there. Something small and dark and perfectly round. She scraped at it with her fingernail. It wasn't a piece of rock, it was metal. Lead. She looked up at August, her eyes wide. "This isn't from an avalanche," she whispered. He followed her gaze. His face went rigid. It wasn't a crush injury. It was a bullet hole. Someone had tried to make it look like an accident. Someone had shot Will Rakes and then buried him in a rock slide, leaving him for dead. The blizzard raged outside, trapping them. But the real storm was inside this room. They weren't just sheltering a victim anymore. They were sheltering a witness and a murderer's target. The kitchen fell silent. The wind howled, rattling the window panes, but inside you could hear a pin drop. The men, Cal and Tommy and the others, stared at the tiny piece of lead Lark held in her palm. A bullet. The messenger who brought Will in, a skinny kid from Talbot's camp, started to tremble. I didn't see nothin', he stammered. They just said it was a rock fall. That's all they told me. Who's they? August asked, his voice dangerously quiet. The foreman, a fella named Sloan. August's eyes met Lark's. This changed everything. This wasn't a fight over water rights anymore. Ezra Talbot wasn't just a greedy businessman. He was covering up an attempted murder on his own work crew. But why? What did this boy, Will Rakes, know? Tommy, August ordered, take our guest here to the bunkhouse. Give him some coffee. Don't let him out of your sight. The kid looked terrified, but he went. August turned back to the table. We need to get this bullet out. Now. For the next hour, the kitchen became an operating theater. Lark held the lantern steady, her hand never wavering. May, brave and silent, brought hot water and clean rags. August worked with a grim focus, his face a mask of concentration. The boy on the table was a stranger, but in that moment, he was one of theirs. To lose him would be to let Talbot win the first battle. Finally, with a soft scraping sound, August extracted the bullet. He dropped the misshapen piece of lead into a tin cup. It was a heavy caliber, a rifle round. Just as he was stitching the wound closed, Will Rakes's eyes flickered open. He gasped, his gaze frantic and unfocused. He tried to speak, but only a dry rasp came out. Lark leaned down close, putting a cool cloth on his forehead. You're safe, she whispered. You're at the 5. His eyes seemed to clear for a second. He looked right at her. His lips moved. Larkin. He breathed. Lark froze. Her blood turned to ice in her veins. It wasn't her name. It was another name. A name from her past. A name she had buried back in Missouri. He said it again, a little stronger. Larkin. He's here. Then his eyes rolled back in his head, and he was gone again, lost in the fever. August was staring at her. What did he say? He knows you? No, Lark said, her voice tight, her mind racing. No, he's delirious. She couldn't look at August. She couldn't let him see the fear in her eyes. Larkin. It was the surname of the family she'd run from. A powerful, ruthless family of land barons who believed they were above the law. She had witnessed something she shouldn't have. A murder over a forged deed. She had agreed to testify. But the night before the trial, they had come for her. She'd escaped with nothing but the clothes on her back and the pistol under her coat. She had changed her name, traveled 1,000 miles, and built a new life from scratch, all to escape them. And now, a half-dead boy on a kitchen table had just told her that her nightmare had found her. He was here, in Montana. And if he was here, it was a certainty he was working with Ezra Talbot. The methods were the same. Forged papers, threats, and murder when threats weren't enough. This whole water rights scheme was just a cover. They were after something bigger. The ranch wasn't just in the way of a flume. It was in the way of the Larkin family. And they didn't remove obstacles. They destroyed them. She felt a small hand slip into hers. It was May, looking up at her with worried eyes. Lark squeezed the child's hand, a silent promise she wasn't sure she could keep. She had run to Last Chance, Montana, thinking it was the end of the earth. But it turned out to be the one place she couldn't hide. The past hadn't just caught up to her. It was waiting for her. The blizzard locked them in for 2 days. 2 days of listening to the wind scream and waiting for Will Rakes to wake up. He drifted in and out of fever dreams, muttering words that made no sense. But he never said that name again. Lark didn't sleep. She sat by the young man's bed, bathing his head, forcing broth between his lips. Every time he stirred, her heart hammered against her ribs. She was tending to a ghost from her past. August watched her. He didn't ask any more questions, but she could feel his eyes on her. He was a man who noticed things. He noticed the new tension in her shoulders, the way she jumped at every creak of the floorboards. On the third morning, the wind finally died. The world outside was a silent, sparkling landscape of white. It was beautiful and deadly. "Cal," August said over breakfast, "ride into town. Use the back trail. It'll be clearer. Don't go to the sheriff. Go to Judge Miller. Tell him what happened. Tell him we have a wounded man here who was shot, and the incident was covered up as a work accident." "And the bullet?" Cal asked. "The bullet stays here," August said, his eyes on Lark. "As evidence." There was an unspoken question in his gaze. "What aren't you telling me?" Lark knew she had to say something. But what? The truth would put them all in even more danger. The Larkins were not just criminals. They were a plague. They corrupted everything they touched. Sheriffs, judges, entire towns. She couldn't be sure who in Last Chance was already on their payroll. That afternoon, she was in the barn, her hands busy with the churn, her mind miles away. May was quietly helping, her presence a small comfort. Suddenly, August was there, standing in the doorway. He was holding something in his hand. It was her pistol, the one she kept under her coat. "This is a fine weapon, Miss Donovan," he said, his voice level. "Too fine for a simple milker. It's a Colt Peacemaker, balanced for a quick draw." Lark's hands stilled on the churn. "A woman alone needs a good pistol." "She does," he agreed, "but this isn't the only one you own, is it?" He stepped aside, and Lark saw what he was carrying in his other hand. It was the false bottom from her travel trunk. He'd found it. Lying on the wood was a second identical pistol and an oilskin pouch. He slowly unrolled the pouch. Inside, nestled in velvet, were not bullets. They were a set of silver collar stays, a pair of pearl cufflinks, and a small, elegant pocket watch. Things a lady might own, not a dairymaid. "The boy, Will Rakes," August said, his voice low and hard. "He wasn't saying your name. He was trying to warn you, wasn't he?" The secret was out. There was no more hiding. "My name isn't Donovan," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's Larimore, Lark Larimore, and the man Will was talking about. His name is Silas Larkin. I was set to testify against him and his father for murder back in Missouri." She told him everything: the forged deed, the man they killed, her escape in the night, the new identity, the constant fear she'd been living with for 2 years. August listened without interrupting. His face was unreadable, carved from stone. When she finished, the silence in the barn was absolute. "So this isn't about water," he said finally. "It never was," she replied. "The Larkins don't care about a flume. They want land. They want everything, and they'll kill anyone who stands in their way." She looked at him, her eyes pleading for him to understand. "You have to let me go. If I leave, they'll follow me. They'll leave you and May alone." "No," he said. The word was flat, final. "They shot a man on my land. They threatened my daughter in my town. They made this my fight." He looked down at the fine pistols, then back at her. "You're not a milker who can shoot. You're a shooter who happens to milk cows." He wasn't angry. He wasn't scared. He was something else. He was resolved. Suddenly, a small voice piped up from the corner. "I saw something." They both turned. It was Billy Pike, Lark's hired hand. He'd been mucking out the far stall, and they hadn't even noticed him. He was pale, his eyes wide. "When we were in town," Billy said, his voice shaking, "at the telegraph office, I saw that man Talbot. He slipped a note to the operator, but he tapped something out on the counter before he left." "Tapped something out?" August asked. "Like the telegraph key," Billy said. "A code. I used to hang around the station back home. I learned some of it." "What did it say?" Lark asked, her breath catching in her throat. Billy swallowed hard. "It wasn't long, just 3 letters. S-O-N. Son. Silas Larkin. Silas was the son. His father was the real power. But Silas was the one who did the dirty work. He was here, and they had just told him everything. The telegraph operator was working for them. When Cal rode to town to get the judge, he wasn't sending a message for help. He was walking straight into a trap, and worse, he was telling their enemies exactly what they knew. They weren't just cut off by the snow anymore. They were surrounded. "They know," Lark whispered. "They know we have Will. They know he's alive." August's face was grim. "They won't risk him talking. They'll come here, and they'll come tonight." The ranch transformed. It was no longer a home. It was a fortress. August gathered the hands in the main house. There were only 6 of them, plus August, Lark, and Billy. 9 guns against who knew how many. "Talbot and his men aren't just trying to scare us off," August told them, his voice ringing with cold fury. "They tried to murder Will Rakes. They lied about it. And now they're coming to finish the job. We are the only thing standing between that boy in there and a shallow grave. There's no law coming to help us. We are the law tonight." The men didn't flinch. They were ranchers, not gunslingers. But they were hard men who understood the simple math of survival. You protect your own. They boarded up the windows on the first floor, leaving small slits to shoot through. They brought every lantern inside, so the yard would be cast in darkness. Every rifle was cleaned and loaded. Every box of cartridges was placed where it could be reached. Lark took one of her peacemakers, strapping the holster to her hip. It felt familiar. Heavy. A part of herself she had tried to forget. She gave the other one to August. He handled it with an expert's ease. This quiet, grieving man had his own secrets. May was sent to the root cellar with piles of blankets and a single lantern. The girl's face was pale, but she didn't cry. "You be careful," she said to Lark, her voice fierce. "You hear me?" "I hear you," Lark said, hugging her tight. As dusk fell, a heavy silence settled over the 55. The snow-covered landscape was beautiful, serene, deceptively so. The moon was rising, casting long black shadows that looked like men creeping through the trees. They took their positions. August and Cal at the front windows of the house. Tommy and another hand in the bunkhouse. Lark and Billy took the barn loft. It had the best view of the entire yard. Hours passed. The only sound was the wind whispering through the pines. The waiting was the worst part. It chewed at your nerves, made you see things that weren't there. Then Billy grabbed her arm. "Look," he whispered, pointing. A single rider was approaching. Not fast, just a slow, steady walk. He wasn't hiding. He stopped just at the edge of the lantern light spilling from the barn. It was Ezra Talbot. He was holding a white flag. "Hail!" he shouted, his voice carrying clearly in the cold, still air. "August, hail! I know you're in there. This can all be over. No one else needs to get hurt." From the house, August's voice boomed. "You're a little late for that, Talbot. You should have thought of that before your man put a bullet in Will Rakes." Talbot's laugh was thin and humorless. "The boy had an accident, a tragic accident. You're creating a problem where none exists. I have a dozen sworn statements from my men saying they saw the rock slide." "And I have the bullet we dug out of his back," August yelled back. Talbot was silent for a moment. "That's unfortunate," he said finally. "It seems you've left me no choice. This is private land, Hale. My land, according to the papers filed in Helena. You and your people are trespassing. I'm giving you one chance to lay down your arms and surrender the boy. And if we don't? Then my associates will be forced to remove you," Talbot said, "by any means necessary." Lark raised her rifle, settling the sight on Talbot's chest. She could end this right now. One shot. But just as her finger tightened on the trigger, a flicker of movement caught her eye. In the trees, beyond the main gate, a glint of moonlight on metal. They weren't just out there. They were already surrounding the ranch. Talbot wasn't a negotiator. He was bait. "It's a trap," she hissed to Billy. "They're already in position." As if on cue, a rifle shot cracked from the darkness. It wasn't aimed at the house. It was aimed at the barn. The bullet splintered the wood just inches from Lark's head. The battle for the 5-5 had begun. Gunfire erupted from all sides. The night exploded in a chaos of muzzle flashes and the roar of rifles. Glass shattered in the main house. Men yelled. A horse screamed in the corral. Lark and Billy returned fire, aiming for the flashes in the trees. They were blind, shooting at shadows. Down below, she could see August and Cal moving from window to window, making it seem like there were more defenders than there were. One of Talbot's men made a break for the house, running low and fast across the open yard. A shot rang out from the bunkhouse. The man crumpled and lay still. One down. But there were too many of them. They were methodical, experienced. They laid down a withering crossfire, pinning everyone down. Lark knew this wasn't a crew of miners. These were professional gunslingers, Larkin's men. Suddenly a new sound, a crackling, hungry sound, and the smell of smoke. "Fire!" Billy yelled. At the far end of the barn, orange flames were licking up the dry wood walls. They'd thrown oil, then a torch. They were trying to burn them out. "We have to go!" Lark shouted, grabbing Billy. "Down the ladder, now!" They scrambled down into the smoky chaos of the barn. The cows were panicking, kicking at their stalls. Lark didn't hesitate. She threw open the main barn doors. "Go!" she screamed, slapping the animals on their rumps. "Get out!" The 3 cows, wild-eyed with terror, stampeded out into the yard, creating a momentary chaotic diversion. Lark and Billy ran for the cover of the main house, shots kicking up snow at their feet. They dove through the kitchen door just as August was barring it behind them. The barn was going up like a tinderbox, casting the entire yard in a flickering, hellish light. "They've got us pinned," August said, reloading his rifle. His face was grim, smudged with soot. "They'll rush the house as soon as the barn collapses." They were trapped. The fire was destroying their cover, and soon the light would make them easy targets. It was only a matter of time. Then, Will Rakes started to scream. The gunfire, the shouting, the smoke, it had woken him up. He was thrashing on the bed, delirious with fever and terror. "Hold him down!" Lark yelled, running to his side. His wound had reopened. Fresh blood was soaking through the bandages. As she pressed down on his shoulder, his eyes focused on her for a split second. Coherent. Lucid. "The map," he gasped, his voice a hoarse whisper. "His wife. She made a map." "Whose wife?" Lark demanded. "What map?" "Hale's wife," Will choked out. "She found it, the old claim. That's why." His eyes rolled back, and he was gone again. Lark stared at August. His wife? What did she have to do with this? August's face was a mask of confusion and dawning horror. "My wife. She was a geologist. Before we were married, she was always mapping the valley. She said the rock formations were wrong." It all clicked into place. The Larkins' land grabs, the forged deeds. This wasn't just about ranch land. There was something in the land, something valuable, something August Hale's wife had discovered right before she died of a sudden winter fever. Her death wasn't a tragedy. It was an assassination, and she'd left behind a map that showed whatever it was the Larkins were willing to kill for. The front door splintered under the impact of a heavy log. They were breaking it down. "Where would she hide it?" Lark yelled over the noise. "I don't know," August shouted back. "She had a box, a small wooden box where she kept her papers." The door groaned, the hinges screaming. Suddenly, Lark remembered something. Something May had said that first night, about her mother, about how she loved to sing the low parts in church, about her hands, how they tucked her in. And one other thing, Mrs. Clean made butter roses, but May's mother. She baked bread in a Dutch oven, hung from a chain, because she liked to watch it turn. The fireplace. Lark ran to the massive stone hearth in the main room. There was a heavy iron hook where the Dutch oven used to hang. It looked like just a part of the masonry, but August's wife had liked to watch things turn. Lark grabbed the hook and twisted it. With a grinding scrape of stone on stone, One of the hearthstones slid sideways, revealing a dark, hollow space. Inside was a small, intricately carved wooden box. Just as her fingers closed around it, the front door burst open. Silas Larkin stood there, framed by the firelight from the burning barn. He was handsome, smiling, and his eyes were completely dead. Behind him, a half-dozen of his men poured into the room, rifles raised. "Well, well," Silas said, his smile widening as he saw the box in Lark's hand. "Look what we have here. I believe that belongs to me." He took a step into the room, and from the shadows near the staircase, a shotgun boomed. The man next to Silas was thrown backwards out the door. August stepped forward, racking another shell into the chamber. "Get out of my house," he said, his voice a low, deadly growl. The fight was no longer at a distance. It was here, hand to hand, brutal and final. Lark didn't have time to think. She shoved the box into Billy's hands. "Get this to May," she hissed. "The cellar. Go!" Then she drew her peacemaker and fired. The room was a whirlwind of smoke, noise, and desperation. Cal went down with a cry of pain, clutching his leg. Tommy fought like a cornered animal, swinging his rifle like a club. Lark moved with a speed and grace that stunned even August. She wasn't just a good shot. She was a dancer of death. She put 2 bullets in the chest of a man aiming for August, then spun to face another. Silas Larkin ignored the chaos. His eyes were fixed on August. This was personal. "Your wife was a meddler," he snarled, raising his own pistol. "She should have stuck to baking bread." "You son of a bitch!" August roared and charged. The 2 men crashed together, falling to the floor. They wrestled for the gun, their faces inches apart, spitting curses. Lark saw her chance. The other gunmen were focused on the brawl. She aimed carefully, but before she could fire, a heavy blow sent her sprawling. One of the thugs had her by the hair, dragging her back, the cold barrel of his gun pressed against her temple. It was over. They were outnumbered. Beaten. "Drop it, Hale," the man holding Lark grunted. "Or the lady gets it." August froze. Silas scrambled to his feet, a triumphant, bloody grin on his face. He picked up August's shotgun. "Now," Silas said, his voice silky smooth, "let's talk about that box, and the map inside it. The map to the silver vein your dear wife was clever enough to find, and foolish enough to write down. Silver. That's what this was all about. A fortune in silver, running right under the 55. "You killed her," August whispered, his voice broken. "Business is a dirty game," Silas shrugged. "Now, where is the boy with my property?" Suddenly, from the top of the stairs, a small figure appeared. It was May. She was holding the wooden box. "No, May! Go back!" August yelled. The girl's face was white with terror, but her chin was set with a stubborn defiance that was all her father. "You leave him alone," she said, her voice trembling. Silas laughed. "Give me the box, little girl. Give it to me, and I'll let you and your papa live." May clutched the box tighter. "Don't do it, honey," August pleaded. "Last chance," Silas warned, leveling the shotgun at August. Slowly, May started to walk down the stairs. Her eyes were locked on Silas, filled with a pure, childish hatred. She held the box out. Silas's greedy eyes lit up. He reached for it, and at that exact moment, every light in the house went out. The room was plunged into absolute pitch-black darkness. For a heartbeat, there was stunned silence. Then, chaos erupted. Someone shouted. A gun went off, the flash momentarily illuminating a scene of confusion. Lark didn't waste the opportunity. She stomped her heel down hard on the foot of the man holding her. He yelped in pain, his grip loosening for just a second. It was enough. She twisted, driving her elbow into his throat, and broke free. From the darkness came Billy Pike's voice, surprisingly loud and clear. "Federal marshals! Drop your weapons! You're surrounded!" It was a bluff. A desperate, crazy bluff. But in the confusion, it worked. Some of Larkin's men hesitated, and in that hesitation, the tide turned. August, knowing the layout of his own house by heart, moved like a ghost in the dark. A grunt, a thud. Another gunman was down. Then, the back door of the kitchen burst open, and the bluff became reality. 3 men, broad-shouldered and armed with repeating rifles, stormed into the room, led by a grizzled man with a silver star pinned to his coat. "Silas Larkin," the lead marshal barked, "you're under arrest for the murder of Marshal John Pettigrew in the territory of Missouri." Silas stared, his face a mask of disbelief. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place for Lark. That's who she had seen Silas kill, not just a landowner, a federal marshal. That's why they had been so relentless. But how did they find them? Billy Pike stepped out of the shadows, and he wasn't holding a lantern. He was holding a telegraph key, a portable one, with a wire running out the broken window. "The telegraph operator in town works for them," Billy explained quickly. "But they cut the main line west. They forgot about the old military line that runs north through the mountains. I spliced into it." He wasn't just a hired hand. He was smarter, braver, and more resourceful than any of them had known. Silas Larkin saw the net closing. With a desperate snarl, he grabbed the nearest person to him as a shield. It was May. He pressed the shotgun to her head. "Everybody back!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Back, or she dies!" The marshals froze. August let out a sound of pure agony. Lark stood across the room, her peacemaker held steady in her hand. There was only one shot. The light from the burning barn was faint and flickering. Silas was using May as cover. It was an impossible shot. "There's no way out, Larkin," the marshal said, his voice calm. "I'll walk out of here," Silas snarled. "And she's my ticket." Lark's eyes met August's across the ruined room. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. He trusted her. She took a breath, letting it out slow. The world narrowed to the front sight of her pistol. She saw the sliver of space between May's head and Silas's arm. She saw the flickering firelight on his cheek. She remembered her father's words from a lifetime ago. "Don't aim for the target. Aim for the space right behind it." She fired. The sound was deafening in the small space. Silas Larkin's head snapped back. He staggered, a look of complete surprise on his face. The shotgun clattered to the floor. He crumpled like a puppet with its strings cut. May was safe, untouched. She ran into her father's arms. The long night was finally over. The aftermath was a blur. The marshals took Silas Larkin's body and his captured men away. The sun rose on a scene of devastation. The barn was a smoldering ruin. The house was riddled with bullet holes. But they were alive. They found the map inside the box. It was a beautiful, hand-drawn chart of the valley's geology, with a single, clear mark indicating a massive, untapped silver lode. It was the legacy August's wife had left behind, proof of Larkin's motive, and the key to the Double Five's future. Will Rakes would survive. The marshals had brought a doctor, and he was now resting peacefully, the fever broken. Lark stood on the porch, watching the morning light creep across the snow. August came and stood beside her. They didn't speak for a long time. "Lark Larimore," he said finally, trying out the name. "It suits you." "I think I prefer Donovan," she said with a small smile. "It's simpler." "You are the least simple woman I have ever met," he said. And this time, he wasn't just almost smiling. He was smiling for real. It changed his whole face, erasing years of grief. May came out and slipped her hand into Lark's. The 3 of them stood there watching the sunrise. A new family forged in fire and ice. They had faced the ghosts of the past and won. The ranch was safe. The valley was theirs. And for the first time in a very long time, the future felt as bright and open as the Montana sky. This story is a testament to the fact that you can't outrun your past, but you can turn and face it. If you enjoyed this journey to the wild frontier, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of justice and survival.